no doubt about it, 2022 has been, for us, something of a monumental year. It's also been an exciting year, a very frustrating year also. At the start of the year, Tom had his 125 licence, so was of course constrained to his smaller bikes. He did have his day limit and had his scooter, but he was really hoping by the time we got to our international trip later in the year that we'd be riding something bigger. That, of course, didn't quite work out. For Deb, it was a monumental year because it was the year she turned a big age. I won't tell you how old she was, but there's a 5 and there's a 0 in it. How did she celebrate this? Well, she celebrated it in the way that all bikers do. The week before her birthday, we tripped on down to Winchester on the bikes, visited Winchester area. We also visited the Bombay Sapphire factory, which I'm told to a drinker is something like visiting Disneyland. And then we finished that off on the way home by visiting the Stone Circle at Avebury. A very creepy place, I think you'll agree. On the actual day of her birthday, Deb forgo the whole party thing. She's not really a party animal. So instead she decided to do a skydive, which is quite a feat for her because she's not good with heights. Nevertheless, she did the thing anyway, and even though she was absolutely shitting bricks before it started, by the time she got on the plane she calmed down, and by the time she had landed, she had a fantastic time. If you're ever considering doing a skydive, definitely just go and do it. Deb did her skydive at Langer Airfield, which is just outside Nottingham. And I have to say, brilliant place, they really looked after it, she had a fantastic time. Would she do it again? I think she'd do it again in a second, if we could afford it. Following a skydive, Deb took the BSA out for a spin. We did a bit of filming with it too. She's not really into the BSA. She likes riding it. She's not so keen on the fact the brakes are awful. And of course the gearbox being effective on the wrong side for her is a little bit confusing. She doesn't like it too much. Nevertheless, Deb is a great rider, so she never had any problems with it really. I think it always goes much worse in her head than it does in reality. Following that little adventure, we had a ride down to Shrewsbury and spent some time in prison. Shrewsbury Prison is open to the public and is a great place to visit actually. It's very interesting, but it's bloody cold mind you, but a really good place to visit and was something that we really enjoyed actually. You get a guided tour, they even do ghost tours there apparently. It's a bit creepy at night and I think the fact that the place is so cold would definitely add to the atmosphere. But nevertheless, a great place to visit, it's not too expensive. Well worth a trip out, I think. One of our first ride-outs of the year was to the Big Biker Breakfast. These were around throughout North Staffordshire and also in the Midlands too, I believe, as well as other areas in the country. They're put together to promote road safety and rider training. As the name suggests, you do get a free breakfast. Well, bacon butty, which pretty good really. I think it was well worth the trip. It was noticeable that the first one we went to wasn't that well attended. There was a few hundred bikers there, but it wasn't really packed out. Although it was quite early in the year. The last one that we attended was at the end of summer, and that was heaving. It was noticeably more popular. Now it could be that the weather was very nice that day, but also I think that the fact that the word got out that it was a nice event to attend. Hopefully they'll be running similar events next year, so we can attend those. In the middle of the year, we took a trip to Ireland. Unusually for us, we didn't actually go by bike. We had been to Ireland before by bike, but of course that was for the racing. And we generally just toured around by car, so not much to write home about that really. It was a nice place to visit though. We'll definitely be going back there with the bikes. It's a great place to visit. The roads are great fun and really ideally suited to the bike. I spent the whole week that we were there just wishing I'd got my bike with me. Following our trip to Ireland, we went down to Cornwall to visit Dorothy's Speed Shop. We used this to celebrate our 1000th subscriber. I'd say it was a great time. We rode our Honda CT110s on and off-road on some dirt trails, and it was nothing too extreme. It was just really to give you a nice flavour of what trail riding is all about. Very enjoyable. I think if you get the opportunity to do that, then definitely do that. Don't know whether Nathan Millwood's going to be organising similar trips this year, but hopefully he will be, because it's something very much worth doing. So thanks very much for organising those trips, Nathan. It was a real buzz. August would see our first international trip for some time. We would take the ferry down into Holland and we'd tour around Holland on bikes. Tom unfortunately failed his test just before we went down there. So he still had his 125 licence, so he was still able to ride quite legally with a passenger. He didn't need L plates, but he didn't have his big bike licence. The whole thing was becoming really annoying by this point. Before the test even started, the guy's asking him why he needs a bigger bike when he's got a 125, almost saying like, "Sonny, you shouldn't be riding a bigger bike." This frankly pissed me off quite a bit, to be honest. The guy was himself riding on a GS. I mean, practice what you preach. If you think everybody should be riding a small bike, ride a small bike yourself. Don't impose your ideas of what's sensible for somebody else to them. However, with his 125 licence in hand, he rode down to Holland. I carried his girlfriend on the back of Big Red, my Goodsey, for the early part of the trip. When we got to Holland, nice and flat, she jumped onto his scooter. The fact that he was on his scooter was a tale in itself. The initial plan was he was going to take his Daylem. We did lots of service work on the Daylem, checked the valves, changed all the oil and the filters, new chain, checked all the brakes, put new pads on it, had the thing ready to go. And then about 3 or 4 days before we were due to go, he announced, I want to go on the scooter because it's better for carrying my girlfriend. I want to carry my girlfriend on the back of the bike. No problem, said I, but I can't guarantee that the bike's going to hold out. We've managed to do an oil change, but we couldn't change the belt, so you're going to have to trust the luck, mate, and see how it goes. Actually, the scooter performed fantastically. The great thing about scooters, even at small capacity, is they're usually pretty roomy. You've got lots of carriage space, and because they're automatic, they perform really well. Despite the size of their engines, they feel bigger than they really are because they pull like a much larger bike would do. And if you're going to take a trip 2 up on a smaller bike, a scooter is definitely the way to go. I mean, I would buy a large scooter ahead of a Goldwing any time. It's going to be lighter, it's more convenient, and I think it's a better vehicle. But the 125, small as it was, did a great job. Tom was able to cruise around at sort of 60, 65 miles an hour without any trouble at all, which in Holland is no problem at all because the speed limit is only 100k on the motorways anyway. Of course, most people ignore the speed limit. Nevertheless, Tom was able to keep up really well, even with a passenger on board. So, well done, scooter. I think it did a fantastic job. That isn't until the end, of course, when we got 20 miles from home and the belt snapped. So, we dropped a bit of money, put a new belt on, new rollers, oil change, got the bike all ready for whatever his next trip may be. And then what happened next? Well, then he passed his test, didn't he? Didn't need his 125 anymore, and the scooter was gone. Ungrateful little sod. And out came the SV650. Took the SV650 out for a ride. The thing performed really well. We got back, noticed he got a fuel leak. Bike was broken. Fixed the problem. Took the bike out again. All performing really well. 2 days later, he used it to work, and the bloody battery was flat. Turns out that the regulator rectifier, a fairly classical Suzuki problem, I have to say, was playing up. I mean, this really shouldn't surprise me, really. It's an older bike, and when you've got an older bike, you will get these sort of problems. Nevertheless, we now have the bike fixed, and hopefully we'll see it next year for a different tour. So what's Tom done since he's passed his test? Well, he's been on a spending spree. He's of course purchased a Ducati, and he's purchased another little bike as well. Well, not so little, which we'll be using in due course next year. You'll see a lot more of Tom on bikes next year, no doubt. So moving forward into 2023, what are we going to be up to? Well, again, more of the same. There's going to be more road trips, more ride-outs. We've already got a continental trip planned, so that's already organised and ready to go. We've got some trips planned as well in Britain, some longer and some shorter. Some will be day trips, some will be maybe take a week. Depends, we'll see how it goes and what the weather does and what that promises. But certainly there's going to be a lot more trips and a lot more road tests hopefully next year. So a lot to look forward to. And of course, we have got that Laverda project to crack on with. We've been falling behind on that one somewhat, but hopefully during the next year or so we'll get a lot more work done. Maybe even get the bike on the road by the end of the year, if not sooner. Time will tell. So I think a lot to look forward to in the next year. We now have bikes that can perform really well on the continent, so there'll be no waiting around for Tom off junctions. He'll be right there with us, and we'll be able to cut through traffic much more efficiently. Thank goodness. So definitely a monumental 2022. Bring on 2023, that's what I say.